If you've ever thought, it just seems like a lot when talking about planning a Disney World trip, this episode is for you. Because I've found that Disney does take effort, but what most people get wrong is where to put that effort. And just like the people we met on a plane to Eleuthera who didn't know which island they were actually staying on, which I'm going to tell you that story in a bit, you don't want to land in Orlando without a clue of what's going on. So in this episode, I'm walking you through the things I see families get wrong over and over again about Disney World and how to make better, smarter, and also more laid-back decisions instead. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to the Laid Back Magic Way podcast. I'm your host, Dana Stanley, creator of Laid Back Magic. As a mom of 3, I know how tough it can be to find time to plan a Disney World trip that doesn't leave you feeling stressed or overwhelmed. That's why I'm here, to help moms like you create Disney vacations that feel even better than they look on paper. Here, we're not chasing perfection, but creating our next favorite memories. So whether you're brand new to Disney or looking to go deeper into the details, this podcast is your go-to for simple tips, mindset shifts, real-life trip recaps, and expert insights to make your trip magical and manageable. New episodes drop every Monday, so be sure to subscribe so you never miss a moment. Okay, let's dive in. If we haven't already met, hello, I'm Dana. I'm a mom of 3 who has seen dozens and dozens of trips for obviously my own family, but hundreds more through my planning community. And one thing I've noticed is that there are just like certain things over and over again that people just get wrong about Disney World, whether it be straight up misconceptions or maybe just focusing on the wrong thing. The first thing I see most people get wrong when it comes to Disney World is thinking that it requires too much planning, so it's just not worth it. I recently got a comment on a reel last week where someone actually used the word scared when describing what they thought about going back to Disney World after 10 plus years of not visiting the parks. And what can happen is one of two things. First, they either do not go to Disney World, they choose to just avoid it, which fine, like that's definitely a decision. Or 2, they still want to go to Disney World, but they're just not convinced that it requires that much work. Like they think, well, I didn't do it 10 years ago. People are just overboard nowadays. Like when I did this back in XYZ year, we had a great time and we didn't have to do all this electronic stuff and all the planning and all the things. We're going to just go with the flow. As soon as I was writing out the notes for this episode, it brought up a memory about a trip when we were going to the Bahamas and we were staying on an island called Eleuthera. So a little backstory is that there is an island called Harbor Island down in the Bahamas that's really small and magical, by the way. You should definitely go. But there's no airport. It's just too small to have a landing strip. So to get there, you have to fly to Eleuthera, which is right next door. And then you can take a little boat over to Harbor Island. And we had a layover on this trip. And during the layover, my daughter made friends with someone else that was also flying to Eleuthera. They were like the same age. We were essentially getting on the next plane together. And on the second leg, we were on a smaller plane and ended up being right next to this family. So we're chatting about the girls and where we're staying, where they're staying. And when I asked them where they were staying, they kind of said it with like a question mark. They were like, Harbor Island? And so obviously that made me a little bit nervous. So when I asked the name of the hotel that they were staying at, we knew that that hotel was not on Harbor Island. It was on Eleuthera. They just didn't realize that they were two completely separate islands. They were kind of combining in their minds Eleuthera and Harbor Island and thinking it was all the same place when there's like water between them. All this to say, were they fine? Sure. Did they have a great time? I'm sure. Did it technically matter that they stayed on one island and not the other? Probably not. But then the more realistic things is if they had done any research, which it didn't seem like they did, honestly, but all like the restaurants you would see and like cool things on Harbor Island, maybe you really wanted to go to XYZ, but now you know that there's like a boat ride between those things. Or maybe they rented a golf cart on Harbor Island thinking that they could just use that to get around, didn't need a car. But now they're not on that island. They're on this huge island and can't easily get around because they don't have a car. Now, if you're listening to this, I doubt you're one of those people that would like get on a plane not really knowing exactly where they were landing. You probably appreciate and understand that a little bit of knowledge ahead of time opens up like a whole world of your vacation, just knowing certain things ahead of time. And I'm certainly not saying that everything can be 100% predicted. But that's the mistake I see people make, is like, figuratively speaking, hopping on a plane because they just don't want to deal with the planning of it and they still want to go anyway. And I do think for certain situations within Disney World that you can be a little spontaneous, but you don't want to leave certain things to chance when it comes to getting somewhere in Disney World, maybe promises you make to your kids that you can't keep, that you realize later, your expectations, making sure you booked the correct room or room type. For example, I chat with a lot of people that stay at the Swan, Dolphin, or Swan Reserve in Disney World. And it's very close to my favorite resort, the Boardwalk. I really love that whole area called Crescent Lake. And the Swan and Dolphin, there's a lot of great things about these spots. It's very affordable. It's owned by Marriott. A lot of people use points. The restaurants are pretty good. And like I said, it's just in a great spot. I think the best spot to stay on Disney property in that vicinity. That being said, some people will stay there. They sometimes, not always, but they won't have a grasp on like the logistics of the resort. Like, for instance, you can't use your Magic Band once you're in the hotel because technically it's not owned and operated by Disney. So you can't use it as your room key. You can't charge things to the room. And I've heard of people, investing in Magic Bands and then they're annoyed that they can't use them at the hotel. Another downside is that the bus won't take you directly to Magic Kingdom. It's actually going to drop you off at the Ticket and Transportation Center first, and then you have to get from there to the Magic Kingdom gates. And I would say 99% of things that you hear people complain about in Disney World is just like those people on the plane. They just didn't know. They didn't realize it. If they had known that about the bus, they would have known that if they just walked next door to Beach Club or even Boardwalk's bus stop, they could go straight to Magic Kingdom and it would have been a lot faster. I didn't realize how important this one was until I became a mom, honestly, and had to start thinking about more of the logistics with kids and just getting around from point A to point B from, our stroller, a single stroller, a double stroller, to car seats. So if you want to imagine you're in Disney World and you're staying at Caribbean Beach Resort and you have a breakfast reservation at Ohana, what do you do? Some people think, we're just going to take all of the buses when we get to Disney. I've heard that you don't need car seats on buses and they're free, but they don't realize that some situations there isn't a bus option, like getting from resort to resort. A bus might be one leg of getting from point A to point B, but then you end up kind of going all over creation and you end up being late and now you're sweaty and rushing when you get there, and it's just like not a good feeling. If you're going to Disney World for the first time or the first time with kids, you'll need to have just a basic understanding of the buses, monorail, boats, and the Skyliner, and just know which ones you need to collapse your stroller for and which ones you can walk on. People get it wrong thinking that it's just a theme park and it'll be easy to get around, but it's big. It's really a whole Disney World. This was one of the first playful arguments my husband and I had when we first started dating, because I grew up going to Disneyland and I kind of was messing with him that it was better because it was the original. But he grew up going to Disney World and his take was, yeah, Walt made Disneyland and it was fine. And then he was like, how can I make it better? And he made Disney World. And while that's a conversation for another day, it is true that when it comes to Disney World, WORLD, it's not this little theme park. It's a small city. You're going to walk 7, maybe 10 miles a day, depending on the park. And then it can take 40 plus minutes to get from your hotel to the park entrance, depending on where you're staying. And that catches up to people quickly when they don't realize how big the property actually is and they waited until the last minute to figure out how to get somewhere. And it's just it's not fun. It's not a fun feeling, and I see it all the time. And it makes me sad because if you just take 5 minutes, literally on the plane down if you wanted to, and just click around Google Maps, you can have a bearing of how to get around. Now, this next one feels small, but it actually changes everything once you're in the thick of the trip. Like once you're like boots on the ground doing the thing. And I don't think it gets talked about enough. And that's that most people will choose the resort over almost everything but the location itself. What I mean is they're looking at the price, the pool, the theming. I get a lot of questions, for example, like which pool is best for toddlers, etc. And I think the question is, where is the resort physically located? And then what is the best for toddlers in that sense? Because it's going to be what you'll end up caring about the most. Now, if there are two resorts that are, let's say, in the same vicinity, like Port Orleans versus French Quarter, or Boardwalk versus Beach Club, or Kidani Village versus Jambo House, then totally. Let's get into the minutia of the lobby or the pool or, the restaurants. 100% yes. But the first thing I think you should think about when you're deciding a resort is where will you be spending the most time? For example, Boardwalk is hands down my favorite resort. But if you posted in my forum, hey Dana, we have a short weekend trip because my husband has a conference in Orlando and we decided we're only visiting Magic Kingdom and we have Christmas party tickets, I wouldn't necessarily be gung-ho for you to stay at Boardwalk. It wouldn't really make sense to stay in the Boardwalk area where you can walk or take a boat to Epcot and Hollywood Studios when you're not even visiting those parks. After you know where you'll be going the most, then you can work backwards from there and see which resorts are closest to that park and then get into the nitty-gritty of what you think is best for your family and your budget. And that brings me to something else people don't always consider until they're already, again, in the thick of it, they're already there. And that's thinking that they're just going to, quote, grab something to eat. I don't care if you are bringing a sack lunch to the parks or doing sit-down dining for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Please, I just want everyone to know where they're going to eat. I can't even tell you how many times I just want a snack. Like, oh, I'm not that hungry. We're just going to grab a snack. And we will be in a vicinity where there are truly no snacks. And when you have 3 kids, it's a bigger deal to schlep like halfway across the park for something that's just supposed to be easy. It ends up being like the opposite of easy, I found, the more I think that I'm going to do something chill. And I always regret it. So now I just know what food spots we're going to be around. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Just the vicinity, which ones I have dining reservations for. And if we are going to do quick service, which ones have mobile order ahead so that my kids don't get cranky. Because mobile ordering is amazing when you plan ahead a little bit. If you wait until you're hungry, sometimes the spot's already filled up. Maybe you hit the button and you realize your food's not going to be ready for 45 minutes. Or if you're mobile ordering, it takes a little bit of time. Like I have to sit down. We have 5 people. I have to sit down and tell Colton like, all right, like roll up my sleeves. I'm about to mobile order. I feel like this gets overlooked a lot of just the brain power that goes into a lot of these things. And it is infinitely easier when you've thought about it ahead of time instead of like being caught off guard. And just a little tip, since you'll be hitting the I'm here button when you arrive at the quick service location to let them know that you're there to put out your food, you can hit that button a little early. So I've waited anywhere from like 5 to 20 minutes at these mobile order spots after I hit the button. So now I just kind of hit it when I'm like headed there. Like, okay, we're walking to said location. And it usually ends up being perfect. Like I'm kind of waltzing up when I get the alert that my food is ready. Magical. Another thing I see a lot is that you can and or should stay in the park all day long. I know I've talked about this on the podcast before about how one of the most difficult things about enjoying a Disney trip and setting expectations is that it's so expensive and it is a lot of work. And because of that, some people feel like they need to like get their money's worth. And listen, I totally get that. But when you think about what is going on to make things enjoyable, it may not be getting there the minute it opens and staying till after it closes. Like that might not actually be enjoyable. And then you're doing the opposite of what you're trying to do. It may be that getting your quote money's worth is actually taking a break or going to the pool or being there less time. It's funny because this next one feels obvious, I think, for people that have gone to Disney World over the years or maybe like yearly vacations. But if you're new to Disney or you haven't taken the kids yet, you'd probably never guess that there really isn't a perfect age for Disney. So a lot of people get it wrong that they're waiting for this elusive perfect age. Now that I've taken truly every age to Disney World, from 6 weeks to 9 years old, between, like staggering the 3 kids as they've grown up, and none of them were born around the same time of year. So really just every age between those. Are some ages easier in terms of logistics? Absolutely. For example, Sailor, our middle, she just reached the height limit where a lot of rides open up. I think she can only not ride 2 things. It's nice that we're able to bring her with Story now, and we can all ride together on these bigger rides. But now that she's older, she also has more opinions and she wants more souvenirs. She is at that age where she's too old to nap, but she kind of could use a nap. So she gets very cranky at the end of the day. In some ways needs an earlier bedtime than my toddler who does nap because she's toast. She's exhausted. And then Crew is almost 2 years old, and he's very, very difficult in some ways. He doesn't want to sit down, for sure. If you're a parent, 2 years old is very hard. But he's not potty trained yet. So we're not taking potty breaks with him. And then he also takes a nap in the middle of the day. So we get that little reset. He gets a reset. And he's free since he's under 3. And he's not even quite 2 yet. So even under 2, the flight down, we can have him as a lap infant, also free on the flight. So he's harder in some ways, but it's kind of nice that we don't have to pay for him. All that being said, and I know that Disney people understand this, that there is pros and cons, if you want to call it magic, at every age. There have been trips where maybe my 1 4-year-old, it was a magical, easy trip, but then their sibling when they were 4 was really hard. You just don't know. Everyone has different personalities. Every kid is struggling with different development things at different ages. So when you're waiting for this perfect thing, or you think they're going to remember things, for every plus, just know that there's going to be a minus. I guarantee that there's going to be something on the trip that they lock onto, and that's their version of magic. And it doesn't matter if they're 6 weeks. Okay, 6 weeks is pretty young. I don't know if they're seeing magic. But from little to 9 years old, whether it be a character or seeing a train or seeing fireworks for the first time, you can see it when it clicks for them. And even more than that, I think a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. And this next one is a perfect example. One of the biggest ones for me is booking your tickets and dining reservations first. What can happen when you skip what I call a sketch is now you're kind of stuck with these concrete things. We're visiting the parks from this date to this date, and you get tickets for those days, which could be more or less than what you need. Then you have set dining reservations that you don't want to cancel because they were hard to get. What ends up happening is you're pigeonholing yourself and your plans to now fit around these things. But it should be the other way around. Most people think Disney planning is any other trip. You grab a hotel, you grab some tickets, and you show up. But really, without at least a loose sketch, you could end up wasting a ton of time in lines, missing big experiences that you're hoping you could have, and then spend more money fixing last minute problems. I've seen this many, many times. There is one word that has changed the way I market my business completely over the years, and that word is stress-free. Stress-free used to be in my copy and all over my website, all over my Instagram in the beginning. And I found just as my business grew, the more I was online, the more I started talking with people and learning even more about Disney planning and going to Disney World more. It was a disservice to say, join Laid Back Magic for a stress-free Disney trip. Or I've seen rent this stroller for a stress-free trip, or hire this travel agent for a stress-free vacation. And that's the mistake of thinking if I just do this one thing, if I just kind of hand this off, that your vacation itself will be free of stress. Can it lessen the stress? For sure. Can it make the planning itself less stressful? 100%. But the vacation itself, especially with kids, traveling in general, is going to be a lot on your stress levels. It just is. It's a lot to think about at once. There's a lot going on all at once. It's a long day, even if you're taking breaks. It's just an unusual day that you aren't used to, that your kids aren't used to. You're going to have your kids and family, maybe you're in like a little studio together 24/7, which honestly is like pretty close to my normal, but I know it's not for everyone. And that can be like a pretty stressful experience if you're not used to it. And if you're anything like me, of just like being in a woman's body when she had a kid 2, 3, even 4 years ago, like there are chemicals and hormones that you and I don't even understand what is going on, like the turmoil inside of us. And I'm pretty sure no service in the world can take that away. So can these things lessen the stress, especially like all compounded together? Yes. But don't set the expectation that the trip is going to be stress-free. That's just a crazy thing for anyone to try and promise or guarantee. But don't set yourself up with the expectation that because I did XYZ or used XYZ, this trip is going to be stress-free. I feel like that's just a crazy thing for anyone to try and guarantee. If any of these things made your stomach twist a little, that is not a sign that you think or you're doing anything wrong. It just means that you care about your trip, which is great. I've made some of these mistakes too, and that's exactly why I created Laid Back Magic in the first place, so that I could have a clear roadmap that I could repeat for every single trip with the actual steps to take so I knew what to focus on and when, all in one place. I'll link it for you below, or just head to laidbackmagic.com and use the word podcast to get a special price as a thank you for listening to the show. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Laid Back Magic Way podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode and it was helpful for you, it would mean the world to me if you'd write a quick review. Your reviews help more moms like you find the show, and I read every single one of them. Seriously, thank you in advance. You can find me on Instagram at somewhereworthwhile, and I'd love to hear from you there. DM me if you have any questions about this episode or what you'd like to see in future ones. Until then, keep planning for your next favorite memory, and I'll see you next time.